Hey guys, so today we're going to remake Granite by Sleep Token, and it's going to sound like this. This is going to be a fun one. Sleep Token blends so many genres and influences into one sound, and their production is so creative, so squeaky clean, and just so unique. So today let's look into how they achieve their genre blending sound without it just being a mess. And we'll start the song, of course, with the intro, that boom 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 synth. And for this sound I started by just looking through Cubase presets and I found this one. Obviously we don't want that arpeggiator, so let's turn that off. That already is kind of close to what we're looking for. To me, it sounds kind of like a triangle sine kind of wave, so we've got something kind of like that going on here, and this one is kind of for more of that like bell-like resonance, boom boom, so it's kind of got that ding to it. But you can see there's quite a lot of modulation going on here, so let's just turn some of that down because we don't need it to be so like wow. There you go, it's just a little more subdued, less resonant. Let's also turn down the resonant here and the cut off a little bit. Yeah, so that's already much more what we want, and you can hear there's a fast attack and then a pretty quick decay, so we want that kind of boop. We don't want it to be too we want. So you can see here we're going for like a fast attack and then dropping it down after. And if we just add a little bit of stock chorus here and some U-Jam reverb, we get something a little more atmospheric. That's way closer to what we want. The reverb gives it that atmospheric vibe, and the chorus is super important because there's kind of this uneasy feeling in the intro, even though it's like a nice ambient synth. Just like the last video I did on Deftones, it's like, yes, it's meant to start off nice and pretty, but they want to give you this uneasy foreboding feeling so that you know it's going to get heavier later on. And a super smart way of doing that is by detuning it, so just feels a little bit wobbly, a little bit off, a little bit uneasy. That is 100% intentional by the band. They want to set up your expectations as a listener, get you super comfortable, but just kind of let you know it's not going to be an easy ride. Like, it might be a nice sound, but there's something a little off about it. So let's just get that intro laid down. It's just 4 notes repeating. I'll just fix the MIDI because I suck at keyboard. So here's our intro. Okay, let's keep that going, and we're now ready for this bass sound, which I absolutely love. Like, I am obsessed with that sound, and I don't know what Sleep Token's main influences are, but it wouldn't surprise me if those guys are pretty into like drum and bass. They're a British band, so I imagine the UK like club scene has had some influence on them, because that's definitely where this sound came from. So I'm using Vital for this sound, and it's essentially like a detuned respace, but I'm using some kind of unconventional waveforms because I want to get a good variety, so it's kind of a really full sound. And yeah, again, for that uneasy feeling, we've just got a little bit of detuning on every oscillator so that there's something uneasy, some like wobbly frequency stuff going on to again give you that feel that something's just a little off. And my favorite thing about this sound, you can see I've got the glide halfway, so I just love that sound. So cool. Vroom, rather than just boom, boom. And there's just 2 more keys really to getting this sound. One is a lot of distortion. This is an intense sound. You can hear kind of in the background. It's very distorted, but just not too in your face. Like, that's not clean in any way, so you need a lot of distortion, but it wouldn't work without this filtering. You can see I'm really bringing down the low pass, so we're not getting any fizz, any like in-your-face distortion, just this subdued, subtle kind of rumble. So a blend of different waveforms with some glide between notes, going into a heavy distortion and some low-pass filtering is basically the key to this sound. And the last thing is, of course, a bunch of reverb just to tie it in with that first synth and keep everything in the intro in the same atmosphere, so it's kind of all in the same space, all has this spaciousness about it. Alright, so now we want to lay down some drums, and it's going to be very light percussion in the verse. You know that heavy drop is coming, and the band does not want to give you too much before then, so it's going to be very minimal and light drums just to kind of get some sort of rhythm there. So we're going to start with this sound I found in the U-Jam Dope kit, which is like a hip-hop kit. It's kind of like a snare, like a clap, but very subtle. Like, it's not loud, it's just... And that's going to go like this. only very subtle, but this is only here to establish a groove basically, because the whole song is kind of built around that rhythm of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And the only other percussion sound we need in this verse is a big clap. So I'm again using a UGEM kit, this time the Candy one. And that is the kind of thing we need. So it's just going to fall on the beat like this. That sounds cool, but it's not quite there. So I'm going to start by just low passing and high passing it so that we only get the mid range. Because again, we want to keep everything in the same space. It has to feel subtle. It has to feel spacious. And let's also just, I kind of want to emphasize the high mids. So it just bites a little more. There you go. Really gets the clap out of the sound. And again, let's use the UGEM reverb. Not sponsored by this company, just great plugins. There you go. We just want to soak it in reverb so there's a huge tail on that snare. Really amplifies the spaciousness in the mix here and kind of makes it feel lonely and isolated. All right, so now we're ready for the first chorus. It's going to stay pretty chill, but it does lift a bit. So we're going to start by just copying these drums over like that. Copying the synth over as well. So just keep the verse going like... And we're just going to layer more sounds. So firstly, we're going to want some more claps. And I found this sound in Cubase, another stock sound. So this is a bit more of a human hand clap sound. In the verse, we have more of like a ambiguous kind of clap. Then in the chorus, it's more like humans actually clapping their hands. And let's just take the timing down just a little. So this is hitting a little bit early, so you really get that effect of multiple humans clapping slightly out of time with each other, and it just sounds a bit bigger as a snare. And you guessed it, we're just tying it all together again with the same reverb. But that clap still doesn't sound quite big enough to me, so I'm going to layer another sound. This is another stock Cubase sound that I found, so... kind of a little more like what we had in the verse, but just a bit more in your face, a bit more harsh, and a bit more kind of EDM sounding. Same reverb again, and the same high pass and low pass filtering to keep it working with the other claps. All right, and the last thing with the drums is this one. In the chorus, I want to kind of bump that up a bit. It gets a little more powerful in the song, so I'm going to take this rock kick drum from another UGEM kit. And let's just layer it straight on top of that little snare sound. So we go from the to a bigger, more of a punch. Still not giving the listener too much, still building the tension, but just letting the song evolve a little bit as it goes. All right, and with that same bass sound from before, let's lay down the chorus line. It's a little different. I just want to jump in, guys, and say if you're enjoying this video, hit the like, subscribe so you don't miss all the videos that I have coming up. And if you guys are liking these videos, definitely keep an eye on the channel because I have some online courses on the way which are going to go way, way deeper than all this stuff and basically just teach you how to do everything you see me doing here on the channel. So if you want to stay notified about that, make sure that you're subscribed. Let's get back into it. So we're now just missing two sounds from this chorus part. The first is this kind of bell-like synth. Love that sound. I hear a lot of like cinematic soundtrack influences in their sound too. Like that is definitely kind of like some ambient soundtrack thing. And this really, again, adds to that fragile, kind of isolating feeling in the mix. It's such a thin, high shimmering sound. It just feels so pretty but fragile. And again, it's a subtle way that they're lifting the song in the chorus without like making it heavy in any way. So this is another sound I've put together in Vital, and it's a very bell-like sound again. So you can see here, I've gone for a kind of bell-like envelope shape, quick attack that quickly goes down and kind of just shimmers out into the sustain and release of the note. And again, with these waveforms, I'm kind of thinking something solid and then something with a bit of crazy resonance. No sharp edges, but a lot going on, so it has that kind of unpredictable bell sound. And the only other thing for this sound is, of course, the reverb and delay, so it doesn't sound too bland. We need that shimmering ambience. Beautiful. All right, and the last thing for this chorus section is I want to add something that sounds a bit like a choir. In the original, this is, of course, Vessel's vocals, but it's so processed that it basically becomes like a synth pad, so that's what we're going to use. So this is another stock sound in Cubase. Just a very basic choir-like pad, and we're just going to run it into the UJam reverb again. Can you guess this is my favorite reverb right now? And a stock delay. Just so it has the same spaciousness we're looking for. I, of course, don't have the original stems, so it's hard to pick apart exactly what the vocal harmonies are doing, but it's something like this. So with all those subtle but effective elements, listen to how much the chorus lifts while it's still leaving so much space for it to drop and get heavy. Really nice minimalistic production. I love how Sleep Token, they kind of have that Deftones thing where they can do the minimalist and they can do the maximalist, and the contrast of the two is what makes them such a special band. All right, and after that we go into the second verse where the vocal energy really picks up, and the instrumental doesn't change much except we get some trap drums going on. So I'm going to use the UJam Dope kit again, and we just want kind of some basic trap rhythms. We just want some hi-hats. Playing a really basic eighth note groove with just some triplets like you would expect in trap. So right there, we will go for the triplet. The only thing really I can say about those hats, because it's just a super generic trap hat sound, is just that it has a little bit of reverb, a little bit of room just to tie it in so everything again sounds like it's in this roomy space together. Same spaciousness in every instrument. And just before we drop it into absolute insanity, let's just keep some of these drums going and kind of make them sound like completely digitally destroyed with some bit crushing. Love that sound. Classic Linkin Park trick. All right, and just before we drop it super heavy, let's just build up some synth chords for a bit more tension. All right, now we're ready for the part you were waiting for, and there is a lot to unpack here, and the guitar tones, the drum tones, the bass tones, they're all pretty complex, but we're going to start with drums, and I'm using the Get Good Drums metal kit. So let's just start by programming what's in the track, and starts with a pretty big ride hit. The kicks just follow the guitar riff. The snare's just going to hold everything together while like the kicks and cymbals are dancing around rhythmically like this. And cymbals are really just going to follow the kick. This is like one of my favorite things about this genre, if you want to call it gent or whatever. It's a very genty thing, at least, to kind of let the cymbals and the kicks just like completely do their own thing and let the snare tie it all together. Very Tesseract. I love how it just makes it feel like wrong rhythmically. It's like wrong, but it works. I like this part. It sounds like he gets a little polyrhythmic on the China, or polymetric. Listen to this. Like what I was saying about it sounding wrong, it's like this does not go out of time. It's completely in time, but it throws the rhythm off so much. Just so groovy. All right, so that's our drums programmed in, and I'll break down the sounds in a minute, but let's just layer another kick. This is like a hip hop kick. Very different to the metal kick we're using, but we're just going to layer it to make it feel a little more bassy, a little more modern. Because Sleep Token, although they are like a metal band, they're so electronic. So that's going to layer with our metal kick and just beef it up. But as far as the metal kick drum, the first thing we're going to do is actually boost the mids. Sleep Token's drums are very heavily processed, very extreme, just so aggressive sounding. And it may seem kind of counterintuitive. Usually I would be scooping the mids for a metal track, but I just want to get a bit of a stronger mid-range going. And take note of the fact that I'm boosting the mid-range instead of cutting it, because this is a very key part of the mix that will make sense a little later on, so remember that. And I'm cleaning up the transients a little bit here, and also gating it, just because we want to clean up that tail on the kick drum, because we're going to be compressing it and squashing it, and we don't want to squash the tail and kind of get this kind of sound. Obviously we don't want all that noise, so the transient shaper and the gate turn that into this. Nice and tight. And as far as compression, we're going to slam it with some parallel compression from OTT, because this has to be a very aggressive, very upfront kick. And you can see again, I'm really squashing that mid-range to get it in your face, pulling down some of the slap because this is a multi-band compressor, and not really worrying about the low end. It's all about that mid-range punch here. And last thing for the kick is some distortion. This is going to be parallel again, so you can see I've not got the mix all the way up, but we're just going to kind of saturate it with Decapitator to make it even more in your face, even more extreme. You hear how that just takes it a tiny bit further, and it's not a huge change, but in the mix, that's going to be the difference we need to really make this kick slap. Same kind of treatment with the snare, with the heavy parallel compression and distortion. The Sleep Token snare is basically two things, like big and epic, so we want reverb, and super powerful in the low mid, so we want some EQ. So again, similar kind of thing with OTT and Decapitator, but then we have, again, you guessed it, UJAM reverb to make it big and spacious and huge. Listen to this, listen without and with this. Huge. All right, and last thing for the snare, we're going to just use the Pultec EQ to boost at 200 Hertz. And again, take note of how much mid-range we're trying to create here in the mix. All right, cymbals are actually a really important part of the Sleep Token sound, and we're going to start by boosting the mid-range. So let's go for a nice, generous, wide band. Yeah, we want some of that harshness. We want the general mid-range, and then we want some of this harshness as well, so it's like cutting a little harder and just really has that high energy in the cymbals. And for compression on the cymbals, I'm using LA2A very aggressively. We do want some dynamics in the cymbals, but it's so important for this kind of style that there's a constant wash of noise from the cymbals. That's where all the energy is, and we can't have that drop too much. So sacrificing a lot of dynamics and hard crashing in the cymbals to kind of get this constant energy. And if that one compressor isn't enough, we're going to again use OTT, just a little bit of it. But again, I'm focusing really strongly on the mid-range. Listen to that kind of like harsh energy. We don't want too much of the crisp, like we want that like all-encompassing energy that you hear in Sleep Token's music. A lot of that is in the cymbals. So listen without OTT and with, and you'll hear how it kind of just adds that like noise in the mid-range that we need. It just sounds a little bit bright and a bit thin without that. And before we get to that guitar tone, I'm going to lay down some bass guitar, and we're going to kind of cheat with the bass, because I'm going to layer bass guitar with an 808. And if you've seen my videos on Bring Me the Horizon, on Architects, then you know this is kind of standard practice in modern metal. And it just means you can focus on shaping the sound of the bass without worrying about it having all the sub you need. You know, it's never going to be an 808. So letting something like this handle the 808 is always going to be more powerful in my opinion, and it's just so much quicker than sculpting like a whole bass sound. So for the 808, we're again using a UJAM product. This one's called Subcraft, and it's insane. It's my favorite 808 I've ever used. This thing is just so fun. We don't want anything too like obnoxious. We just want a subby low, really strong low end. So that sounds good to me. So let's lay down the 808 part, and then I'll track the bass. So that's just giving us the really strong sub bass we need so that the bass guitar can just focus on having that clanky, djenty, high-end sound. And together, these are going to give the impression of just one huge metal bass sound. So let's lay it down. So this bass sound on its own, it might not be the best tone, but in the mix, this is going to give us that clanky, djenty quality that we need. And where the 808 is just handling the consistent, clean sub, we're just letting this one handle that clanky high end and mid-range. It sounds a little harsh without guitars, but again, that mid-range is going to help us a lot when we bring the guitars in a minute. So for the bass tone, I'm using this stock Cubase bass amp, bass. So this has like that metallic pick attack that we need a little bit. And it's just got a really clear sound and a nice growl to it, so that's a good start. But we need something to bring out all the aggression in my playing. This doesn't sound that aggressive, even though I'm picking really hard. So I'm going to use the Dark Glass Ultra, which is always a good bet if you want to bring out the harshness in a bass sound. Only problem is that kind of sounds ridiculous now, so we need to tame it with some EQ. It's got the aggression, it's got all the aggression we're going to need, but it's just a little wild. There's frequencies all over the place. So what I'm actually going to do is, because we're letting that 808 handle the low end, I'm just going to pull it right up so we're not getting any of that sub. And let's just get rid, like, we want the clankiness, but we don't want like harsh, like kind of sounds. So let's just pull down the low pass as well. And even though this is going to get harsh, I want to use EQ to really locate that clanky pick attack, because that is such a signature for this kind of band sound. I'd say that sounds very harsh on its own, but so genty, and that's only going to stick out a little bit in the mix. We just want you to be able to hear that there's a really heavy bass guitar there. It doesn't matter if it sounds a little messy on its own. All right, and now onto the guitar tone where it's finally all going to make sense. So I'm going to lay down the riff on the left and right, then we'll break down the tone. In fact, first of all, let me just get a clean take of this one chord because I don't want to be jumping around the fretboard too much. All right, now let's actually lay down the riff. All right, now on the right, see if I can play this all in one. All right, so tone-wise, I'm going to address the elephant in the room here. These guys like to tune low. Like, for perspective, this is B tuning. Slipknot tuning. It's brutal, it's low, death metal bands use it. Sleep Token tunes to B an octave down, double drop B. So they are tuning their guitars a fifth lower than bass guitar tuning. And I'm not going to do that to this guitar. This poor thing is not built for double drop B. What the fuck? Thankfully, I'm using Archetype Gojira by Neural DSP, which has this awesome transpose feature. So we can just bring the whole thing down an octave. Sometimes if you're doing like big chords, you don't want to do a kind of pitch shifting thing because you're going to lose a bit of clarity. But this is a very simple riff with just single notes, and Sleep Token have such a processed guitar sound that we can totally get away with this. And the thing with this tone is, yeah, it sounds evil and low and badass and everything, but you're basically turning the guitar into a bass instrument, and guitar is a mid-range instrument. You know, if you have a guitar in standard tuning, it's easy to make it scream with distortion, make it up front in the mix, because it's there frequency-wise. This tuning is pretty much at the limit of human hearing. Like, you go any lower, it's not going to even be a note anymore. So it's very hard to work with that and make it scream like a guitar. Like, yeah, you want it to sound super low, but you don't want it to be a bass instrument. All of the energy in guitars is in the high mid-range and the distortion. And tuning this low is super hard to not just get something that sounds lifeless and low, but just not interesting, not exciting, not energetic. So we basically need to find ways to work around how obscenely low this is and stop that from killing the energy of the mix. So that's why we've been focused on the mid-range so much with all these instruments, with the cymbals, the kick, the snare, the bass guitar. Obviously with the guitars, we're also going to try and bring that out, but we're basically everywhere just going to be compensating for that sacrifice we're making to get this low and lose all of that screaming natural guitar sound you get in like a standard tuning, or even as low as B or A or whatever. Going this low is just crazy. So yeah, everything in the mix is basically working together as a team to kind of fill in what's going to be missing in the guitars and like make up all the difference. So as I said, we're starting with the Gojira amp, using that transpose knob to its full potential. Evil. And we have a little bit of gain and the mid-range like all the way up. Again, just to kind of compensate. So it's not all bass, but it's not quite genty enough. So we're going to use the Precision Drive Replica by Audiority. This thing is so good. And we just need something to boost the signal before it gets to the amp to give it that high-end energy. So we've got the attack all the way up, the brightness all the way up, the drive very high, just because we're really saturating all of the high-end. Everything here is just compensating and trying to add something on top of those bass frequencies. So listen without this drive and with it, and you'll hear how it just kind of brings the tone alive a little more, makes it a little less of just a bass instrument. All Alright, and after that, we're going to push it even more into some kind of harsh territory with the frequencies. So I'm going to use this multiband fuzz in Cubase, and let's just destroy the high mids and add a little bit of distortion in the highs. So we'll turn it from this into this. Now that is really starting to sound like a mess, I know. But again, we're thinking about the overall mix here, and we can now tame this with some EQ so it fits a little better in the mix. So this is where, once again, we don't need that very top-end fizziness, so we can tame some of that with a filter. And then let's just be nice and generous with the Q and boost all that high mid-range once again. We want a nice wide band so that, again, we're not just getting this stuff down here, we're kind of compensating up here. And we just have that same tone here on the left and right. Alright, and that is every major sound in this track broken down and explored. I freaking love the production in this song, and it was such a challenge to create something that sounded similar, but I think I got pretty close in the end. Hopefully you guys agree. I hope you guys were able to pick up some cool tricks from this. I definitely did. It was such a fun challenge to remake. Also guys, to say thank you for watching this far, I have a little surprise for you. Check this out. This, hopefully the camera picks this up okay. This is an original Sleep Token pick from the very, very, very beginning in 2016. It's another story for another day as to why I have this, but pretty cool thing to own, and I've never played with this, probably never will. I just like to keep it. So thought you guys might want to see that. Anyway, if you guys want, I might do another Sleep Token video soon, so let me know below if you'd want to see that, or whatever else you want to see on the channel, let me know. Thank you so much for watching, like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next one.